Hey team, wanted to spend some time just giving you a quick orientation to utilizing Blackboard Collaborate. And this is going to be a quick orientation and some pointers that I've experienced in utilizing Collaborate over the last few terms. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. DL also has a lot of resources as well. So in this discussion, we're going to basically work through utilizing Collaborate as we would for an actual class. So I'll show you how to create and close out, how to manage the settings inside of Collaborate and the additional tools that are there. And then I'll talk about some of the tools that I've used in conjunction with Collaborate sessions to try and help with engagement and if you're trying to measure participation. And then finally, and throughout, we'll talk about some troubleshooting or frequent issues that I've seen come up so you can try to avoid those as you plan utilizing Collaborate. So I'm going to share with you my screen and we're going to start kind of working through this. Now to get started, I'm going to basically show you how to utilize it. I'll be using Chrome on a Windows PC that has Windows 10, just kind of so you know where I'm starting at. But I'm also going to show you what it looks like when you're utilizing the iPad as a participant, as well as if you utilize the iPad as an instructor instead of utilizing the PC to gain access as a moderator to your class. All right, so let's jump into it. So Collaborate is a tool inside Blackboard, and it may or may not be already enabled for you to utilize with students. So if you don't see Collaborate Ultra in your Blackboard shell, you'll probably want to reach out to Distance Learning to see if you can fix that. In some shells, I know that the Collaborate Ultra wasn't removed, but it would just not show as a link to students. And so if you have this little box next to it, then it's being hidden from students, and all you have to do is enable it. So we'll do that. We'll show the link. It'll refresh my screen. Okay, now Collaborate Ultra is actually active and available. When utilizing Collaborate Ultra, at least in my course, it's under Course Communications. I would assume that it's probably similar for you as well. So we'll just start by clicking on Collaborate Ultra. We'll see a few resources here. So this is the Collaborate Ultra page. When you're utilizing another device like an iPad, you can access this by going through Safari, but I don't believe it will work on Chrome or Firefox versions on the iPad, only Safari. Right here, I'm using Chrome for this video. Now, you'll see that you have a course room that's open. Kind of think of this as an open interaction area. Students could go in there and utilize some of the things like a whiteboard to have a team meeting if they wanted to. I find that many don't actually access it. And then we'll create a new session. So I would recommend that you leave the course room separate and then create a session for each live class that you're going to hold. So in creating a session, it's pretty easy. We just click on this button. It's going to give us a choice of some details that we can fill in. The details you put in, totally up to you. Now, a few things are automatically enabled. There's a means for students to dial in with the phone if they want to utilize that as a source of their microphone and audio if they don't feel like they have that access on the device they're using. Also, we can provide a link, and the link will be helpful for students who want to utilize Collaborate through the app. The app will utilize the link to take them to the right course, or you could share this link with them separately. Now, a caution, students that attend the class, when they log in through Blackboard, it's going to show you on your side of the Collaborate tool who's logged in by displaying their name. And so it is probably best that students log in directly by going to Blackboard and then going to Collaborate and clicking on your session, because here you're going to provide a guest link that will allow them to utilize it outside of Blackboard. They'll still access the same tool, it'll just be a shortcut. But here, if it's a guest, they don't necessarily have all their information ported over, so you'll have to ask them to enter their name if they're going to use this. You can share this ahead of time or not. Also, if you use the guest link, you can actually give the guest link to somebody else who's going to be helping teach, so maybe a co-moderator or presenter. In that case, they'll have access to the tools that you have access to as the lead. So the guest link here, I'm going to actually use in trying to see how Blackboard looks to the student. And so in a moment, I'll split my screen and I'm going to show you. I'm going to share this guest link by clicking copy, and then I'm going to email it to myself so that I can open that link on my iPad, and then I'm going to show you both the instructor view and what the students will see as a participant. Now, other things that we want to set caution here, generally putting in an end date would seem like a great idea, but I found that if you put that end date in, and let's say that after your session there's questions you're going to answer that students have asked, but it's kind of outside of your initial event details deadline. If so, my experience has then been that it actually will log you out. Though it didn't log the students out, it logged me out when I was trying to communicate with them when we had passed this time. And so it may be best for you to actually do it as a open session in which you're going to close it out after you're done, and then it will become available as a recording if you recorded it in a different area. So if you needed to, you could delete the session altogether. So I'm going to set this just for current time. This is a setting in which you can allow the students to kind of go into the setting and wait for you, as if you had the classroom open before you walked in a live class in brick and mortar. If the classroom was open before you walked in, they would be in the classroom waiting for you, and when you walk in, they're already there. That's the same idea. And so you can choose any of these options or no early entry, so that it will only become available to the student at the precise time that you set up here as a start time. So totally up to you. I find students generally are early for this, and they might be trying to play with their settings for microphone and webcam and all of those things before class starts. And so doing the 15 minutes or so early might allow them to troubleshoot some of those issues beforehand without interrupting your class. You can also provide a description that the students will see before they click on it. And then some more details. So we want our default attendee role to be participant. There's probably only one moderator or presenter that's going to be doing this, and that's probably you. You can allow for recordings, and so that allows you and the student to record if you'd like. I generally provide a recording for the class sessions for students automatically, and I'll show you where that shows up a little bit later. You can anonymize chat messages, but if you're using this as a means of getting interaction with students and you want to make sure that you're getting everyone interacting, you probably don't want to anonymize. There is a chat function inside Collaborate we'll show you. And then we can see a few things here. The participants can share all of these things, and you can disable it. This right here, the Draw on Whiteboard and Files, that is essentially a shared workspace, as if both of you were drawing on the whiteboard together at the same time. And so if you're going to use the whiteboard in this tool, it's great. But if you expect them not to write on it while you're talking, then you probably want to disable or click on this button here. If you are going to have an interactive session where maybe you're doing one-on-one office hours and you want the student to share their knowledge on something or kind of have a collaborative discussion, then utilizing the sharing of the whiteboard is probably helpful. If you find that chat messages are actually disruptive, then you can turn this off and students will have to actually verbally interact with you as opposed to typing in addition to the verbal interaction. Now also there is a private chat function, and so if you have this unchecked, then students can have private chats during your session inside the session that you won't generally see with other students, and so that has a potential of being disruptive. Moderators supervising all private chats, rather, if you're going to use private chats for students, or if at least you're going to leave it enabled, then I would highly recommend that you set this to supervision so you know that the discussions that are going on you'll have access to and you can make sure that they're appropriate. I often will set this, though, that they can only chat privately with the moderators to reduce disruption and confusion in the class setting. All right, so that's kind of the total of the settings that we can choose for this. Once we're ready, again, I'm going to do this just so that I can practice seeing what it looks like for the purposes of showing you. But if you wanted to see and practice and play with it before it's live with students, but you still wanted to see their version of it, again, utilizing this guest link would be fine. And I'm going to use it in participant view, so we'll see what the students would. Okay, so I've got a few things together here, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do before we get started. So we're going to look at the view of Collaborate as the student will see it if they're utilizing an iPad. Right now I'm going to show you how it looks on the browser setting, but I'll also sneak in some views from the iPad Collaborate app as well. Now, if you're trying to utilize Collaborate before a class session actually begins and you want to see what the students will see so you can practice, that's a really good thing to do. There's just some things you'll have to think about. Now, Collaborate in general won't allow you to have more than one Collaborate tab open. And so once I start this session by clicking the Join Session tab, once I start this session, then it will be considered my only view as a moderator. So if you want to open another window on the same device, like your PC, you'll have to use not just a different tab, but a different browser to get it done. Click on the Collaborate link here. I'm using Chrome for my main view, and then I'll open up Firefox here, and I'll input the link and move forward from that. So it's going to take me to a landing page before I enter. As a guest, I'm going to have to enter in my name, otherwise there won't be a name for us to gauge for attendance or for participation. And I'll click Join Session to get started. So I'm showing you that now still on my PC. I'm just using a different device. It's going to go through prompting us about the microphone and video. And in this case, I'm going to allow, but we're not actually going to really use it. Now, the prompt here is exactly what the student will see, especially the first time that they're utilizing this. And so you can see there's a means for testing their microphone. And if they say no, then it'll give some troubleshooting. I'm not going to share the video right now, so I'm just going to skip the video test. And then you'll see, even though we gave permission, there's still the ability to turn on and off our microphone throughout the meeting. Now, there's always a tutorial that you and the students can view. You can do that the first time you get in, hence that early 15 minutes setting, so that students can play around with this if they need to, or you can return to it another time. So I'm going to go to later so that you can do it on your own. If you want to come back to it at another time, then you'll see it's actually in the menu box that shows up on the left side of the screen. There's also a right menu box on this screen as well. Excellent. So right now, I've logged in as a participant well before the actual instructor has logged in yet. So we're going to now look at the iPad, where I've sent the link to myself. I'm going to open it up. And this is a link as a guest as well. And so I'm just going to set in maybe Sean 2, or how about Sean iPad. So I'm going to set the name on this guest participant role as Sean iPad, just to distinguish itself, and I'm going to hit join. Again, I'm using Safari on the iPad. Prompts me to do the same things that it would prompt me to do if I was using the PC. And again, we're using the browser-based one. I'll show you the app a little bit later. I'm going to leave my participant device microphones off, but really all you would have to do to speak or to mute is just click on this right here. You could also hide the video if you're using a webcam as well at any point, as you might want to. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this now, and I'll put up now the iPad. So there we go. Got the iPad view as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and, again, I created this ahead of time, and so it's ready and available. All I really now need to do is join the session. So clicking on join the session will open another tab, so just be aware if you have a pop-up blocker. I don't know that this would be considered a pop-up, but if it doesn't open, that's probably the setting you'll need to check. Okay, so we have our confirming the microphone works test, so I'm going to say yes. I'm going to skip the video test. This is now the moderator or instructor's view, and I have 2 attendees. If there were more than 2, then you would see smaller boxes kind of spread throughout. But to see who's actually logged in and attending, we'll go to a specific area. Okay, so let's orient just to the structure of Collaborate. Some of the functions in this little control panel include an area where you can check your status and settings, and it means of turning on and muting audio, turning on and muting video, and then a tool to raise your hand. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's look first at the menu we've already seen. That was on the left side. If you're going to record, you would do that right here by clicking the record session. It's going to record essentially what Collaborate sees, not necessarily everything that's on your computer, but what you show through Collaborate, it will record. You can click here to use the phone for audio, so it's a good tool if students don't have the ability to actually watch it wherever they are, but you think attending with audio would be helpful, or to supplement their computer audio. This is where we would have our area to do our tutorial and our help section just below it. And then you can report an issue to Blackboard through this directly as well. At the end of every Collaborate session, though, there is a short survey asking about how the tool functioned. Finally, you can leave the session at the very bottom of the left menu. Okay, let's look at the menu on the right side. So this is where a lot of the functioning inside the class is going to occur. So the page that we land on is actually the chat page. And so depending on your settings, you should have at least an everyone tab and then an area for moderators. But you could also have other chat channels that are created when students create them privately if you've enabled that function. Also, right next to it, if we click on the button here, it shows us the attendees. And so these only show the name because I typed them in. If a student gets the guest link, they may not actually type in the name that you need. So be explicit in your instructions how you'd like them to handle that. Next to the attendance tab, we have the area where we'll share content. Now, this is different when you look at this from the PC view than it would be if you were using your iPad to teach from. You can teach from the using Collaborate from your iPad, but it's a limited functionality. So I'll show that towards the end of the video. Right now, we're on the PC view through Chrome. So we can share a blank whiteboard. And again, depending on how we enabled the settings, students will see it or students will see it and be able to write on it. You can also utilize the share application screen. And so if you have a PowerPoint that you want to show, or you're trying to show them a tab on the browser, then you can select that from a few choices. So you can share your whole screen. You can share just an application window. And you can see here we got things like the PowerPoint that I had originally set for this at the outset to list our objectives. And then we can choose specific tabs on a browser to share as well. And so just for the purposes of seeing how it works, I'll show you the actual PowerPoint that we were looking at earlier. I'm going to share that now. Okay, so I've shared the PowerPoint application, the actual PowerPoint program with Collaborate on my PC, but I did not share my entire screen. So you have the option of sharing your whole screen or just sharing PowerPoint. If you want the students to see it as you would present it in class and utilizing some of the functionality of PowerPoint as a slideshow, you'll be able to do that from your PC or laptop, just not from the iPad if you're teaching the Collaborate session from your iPad. And so right now I can see that you see the actual program, but let's go ahead and turn on our slideshow here. So the slideshow is now displaying to the students, and you can actually see that the closed caption function of PowerPoint, if you have that in the version, is showing to the students as well. Now I've turned on the laser pointer here so that the students can follow along. Again, I'm not sharing my screen, I'm only sharing the PowerPoint application. And finally, if I need to do something like write, I do have that ability in displaying it to the students. So teaching from an existing PowerPoint is actually going to be likely pretty easy for you to do through Collaborate. Let's say that I need to go to another tab, or I just am done with this, but I'm not done with the actual Blackboard session yet, then I can just go ahead back to the share application and screen. So let me pull that up. Share application and screen, and I can stop that from occurring by pushing the stop button. Now I'm back to the Collaborate page. Okay, so you can also share files for students to view through this tab. Again, we've talked about using the whiteboard. And there are some other pieces of content that could be helpful, like using the polling tab. So here you can set some questions to poll your students as you're going through. And so if you're using whiteboards in the classroom when you're physically there, this might be a good option for you, but you could certainly just ask questions and have students reply verbally or type in as part of their response if you give them a question. You can also use other tools, like I've not used a whole lot of the polling setting inside Collaborate, but I have used it in conjunction with Socrative. And so I use Socrative as a means of asking questions. I usually actually use this in the classroom as well. And so Socrative they use in both settings. And I use that as a self-paced or teacher-paced, however you decide, quiz that we can use to get instant feedback on topics. And then I can talk about those topics if they say didn't do well in answering that question. You can also create breakout groups if necessary. I personally haven't had much experience with using this, but if it's something that we're going to be using for lab, this might be a good way to put folks into groups that can have discussions on a topic while others work on something else. If you use this, let me know. I'd be happy to kind of include in a follow-up your experience in using the breakout sessions. Settings that you might need to change during the session can be found in the little settings tab of the right menu. You've got means of checking your audio and video settings. Notifications can be updated or changed here. And then our original session settings can be changed as we need to as well. So what we're going to do now is utilize the whiteboard. I do this because there are some nuances about it that I didn't know going into it, and so hopefully it'll help you more than I experienced when I first used it. So when using the whiteboard, what you present here, the students will be able to see, and again, if you want them to be able to write on it as well, everyone would see that, including you, then you have that option in your settings. One big thing to know, though, is if you're utilizing the whiteboard, and let's say that we drew something on here with the pencil and I wanted to erase, it might be tempting to come here and find this eraser, but when you click on it, it erases everything. So there isn't really an eraser, at least that I've found in this function, but you can clear the whiteboard to start over again as needed. So let's go through the basic functionality. I've got the means of having a pointer for selecting. I can use a hand as a pointer here. That's what the student sees. I can utilize the pencil, and if I click here at the top, I can choose different colors from a few. I don't know that you can make your own colors out of it. I can make a shape. I can even type in text if I'd rather than writing by hand. If you're using the iPad, you'll have the ability to use the whiteboard and share it with students. And so the Apple Pencil makes it really easy to draw on the screen there. Otherwise, you'll be drawing on the screen with your cursor, or if you have some means of capturing drawing on the screen like a bamboo writing tablet. In basic functionality, though, when you're using an iPad touchscreen, you can even write with your fingers. Okay, so you have the ability to kind of write stuff out, make examples, display, add different colors, all that fun stuff as well. And then you can even add text in there if that's better than your handwriting like mine is. All right, so that's how we'll help share some information with students. So I've covered how to utilize it to share your screen, how to utilize it to share a PowerPoint file, including it in presenter or slideshow mode, and how to use the whiteboard and share the whiteboard with students. Once you're done with the whiteboard, you can close it out right here, or you can close it out right on the tab. Either one's the appropriate stop sharing tab. Okay, now as I work my way through, if a student raises their hand, if you're looking at the Blackboard Collaborate tab when they do this, you'll receive a prompt. So you can see that I've raised my hand, and when you get to it, you can hit lower hand, and that will basically remove it. Also, though, once that person clicks on it, if you didn't see the initial post for some reason, you were in a different tab and you came back, you'll see that the person that has raised their hand has a visible display when you're looking at the attendees inside of Collaborate. You can utilize that to address any questions that have come up, and the students can actually turn the hand off if they'd like to as well. There's a few different ways that you can see the attendees in this view. If you come up to the right top corner here, you'll see an area where you can switch between speaker and group mode. And so here, the person that it's highlighting as the kind of primary view is what you'll see, but it doesn't change the view for the students. The students have the same option of seeing the presenter versus the entire group view. Okay, if we needed to chat, again, we have our chat function here. We can chat with everybody through this area here, or we can make other chat groups as we need to by creating other channels. Now, supervising those channels. Okay, so if we want to use the chat function, we just click on the chat button down here, and we can see we have at least right now 2 channels. So we have a channel that everyone can see, and so if I have to share a link or something like that that the students need to follow, then I'll place that link in here, and they'll see it in a way that they can just easily tap on and open up another browser if they need to. Also, we have an area for just moderators to discuss. Right now, I'm the only moderator in this, so I won't have much use for it. But if you had proctors, say, in recreating a lab, you could potentially have an area where you can share information and make those breakout sessions as well. Here we can see our attendees. There's a couple functions we have within this box. We can send them a chat message directly. We can on the fly make someone a moderator or presenter, and then we can make someone a closed captioner. Now this would require someone typing in, so it's not automatic like we saw PowerPoint do a moment ago. Or you can remove someone from the session if you feel that they're being too disruptive. On the top, we can search for someone, we can remove this panel, and we can mute all, and that might be something that you have to do if you're requiring them to use audio to engage, just so you can eliminate some of the background noise. Anyone who's been on a conference call with many people understands what happens there. All right, so that's most of the chat function, most of the functionality of the app. Now when I'm done, I can close out the panel here at any point, not just necessarily when I'm done, but to exit, I'm going to come back down here and go to leave session. If I was recording, I probably want to stop that recording before doing so. So I'm going to leave the session, and you can see it's got a quick little survey. It's every time you log out, I believe that shows itself. And if you're looking at the iPad, you can see that I've left from that screen as well. So now it's just basically the folks that had signed in, and it allows them to leave. It will basically kick them out, I believe, if you have an end time set. So if you didn't set an end time, then you're probably going to want to delete the session afterward. Now, the students can gain access to the recordings you made by going to the top three-bar menu on the left side of the Collaborate page in Blackboard, and you can see there's an area for sessions and an area for recordings. The recordings don't show up instantaneously after you push stop. Sometimes it takes a little bit for them to process and publish, but I haven't found any real long delays in time. It takes a few minutes for that to happen, and I think the longest session I've done is like an hour and a half session. And so it will present there, and they'll be able to see it just as if they were viewing it originally, obviously without the interaction component of it. They can filter and manage, and you can delete recordings in this area as well. If students chose to record the screen using Collaborate, which is a function I believe they have, if you click the Allow Recordings, their recordings will show up here as well in addition to yours. Okay, now I want to switch gears just a little bit, and we're going back to the iPad. So remember that when you're using the iPad, you want to use this in Safari if you're trying to do it through the browser. But what I'm actually going to do right now is we're going to utilize the iPad in presenter view as you're a moderator. So if you're teaching on a browser from the iPad. Okay, so the session is still live even though I exited it because we didn't have an end date. So I'm going to jump back in here, but I'm going to do so utilizing the iPad. Now again, you can't have two tabs open with Collaborate running on the same browser. So I'm going to close out the browser that I had open as a student, and I'm going to open the email link that I sent to myself to get started. All right, so I've opened up the Blackboard page utilizing Safari on my iPad. I'm now going to navigate to the class that I'd like to teach this in. Right now it's an offline class. One thing to point out, if you haven't utilized Blackboard in the browser on an iPad as opposed to the app on the iPad, if you've not used the browser, you'll notice, and this is just a common issue that's very frustrating, I believe, as well, and the students see it too, is that when you land, notice that the left menu is not displaying at all. And so the left menu is where they'll gain access to get to the Collaborate session. This is important for this as well as if you make exams that the students need to access through Respondus Lockdown browser. And so you may, if you feel appropriate, you may need to add a tab down here on the welcome page. That's why I've added the learning module tab there. After the first week of class, I do this so that if they access it on their iPad and they're trying to say, find an exam, my exams live in the learning modules, so they can do so without having access to the menu. To access the menu, the student needs to basically go up and down, and it happened just a moment ago, but this little blue bar will show up. If it wasn't there in the beginning, simply moving the screen up and down will show it right afterwards. And so clicking on this blue tab now then opens the menu. There is some frustration though, because sometimes the menu doesn't stay open long enough for you to select something, so you have to kind of get tricky in being able to do that. And there's another bug in which sometimes, even though you might have Blackboard set for a default theme and all the colors are just standard, sometimes the class just randomly has a new theme when you log in and click on something. So sometimes the theme randomly changes to a blue theme in which it covers all the lettering on the menu because you can't see the difference between the lettering and the background. So in those issues, refreshing the screen usually fixes it. So I'm going to go down to Collaborate Ultra here. The session's still open even though I had left it as the moderator because we didn't have an end time set. And I'm going to go ahead and join the session. Okay, now to orient yourself to where our views are right now. I have the presenter view set up on my iPad using Safari, and I've logged in as a guest on the PC utilizing Chrome. So you can see the guest view. So in effect, we basically flopped it between the two. Okay, let's look at a couple of the things here on the iPad functionality. So it's very similar in most ways, but it is different in ways that matter. And so in the left menu, we still have that bar. We can check to start our recording here if we would like to. We can leave the session at the bottom, and then we have those selections, including taking a tour of the functionality. I can change, again, the presenter view to group or presenter. And I have the right menu as well. So very similar to what we saw earlier. I was in the Everyone tab just automatically. But if I go back, I can see I have everyone in moderators. I can see my attendees. I can see some of the options I have for sharing my screen. And I can see the settings area. So the major difference is right here in the Share Content tab. Notice I can still share a blank whiteboard. In the iPad version, we don't have access to sharing the screen. So the best I can do is either share files directly to them or previously to the actual meeting. Maybe I shared those files and I could tell them we're working on this slide, for example, so they can follow along, but I still can use the whiteboard if necessary. So clicking on the whiteboard opens that up. And right now I'm in portrait view, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate. I can collapse the right menu so I have more writing space. I will see if someone raises their hand, but not necessarily if someone types in a question. So you want to go back and check that tab when you can. Okay, now some good news though is that when I'm here on the whiteboard screen, even if I collapse the right menu, I still will get a notification both when somebody raises their hand and if they don't raise their hand, but they type something into the Everyone chat. So I'm doing that right now from my view. There we go. And I can manage to go back to the chat screen as I need to answer questions. Okay, so it keeps you in the loop even though we've collapsed that section. I have the same functionality. I can draw. I can utilize text. And I can clear the screen as needed. So if you're utilizing Collaborate just to have discussions or to show them something that you would generally draw on the whiteboard in class, I find that that's actually really helpful when you're using the iPad, partly because the Apple Pencil makes it very, very easy to draw on the screen and is better in representing what you're trying to achieve than the aftermarket styluses that you might have for your device. So if you can, I recommend using that. The caveat, unfortunately, though, is you can't share the PowerPoint presentation. You could share the files, like the actual PowerPoint or PDF files if you'd like to, if they haven't accessed it already, but you won't be able to let them see your screen through Blackboard on the iPad. Okay, so I want to change our view a little bit here again, and so I'm still on the iPad, but now I'm going to show you what the app will look like when a student utilizes the app to access Collaborate. Okay, so the app is actually really simple to show you. You'll type in the URL, or in my case, I just emailed it and copy and paste here. And then I'm in the actual app, and then I'll hit join session, and it just sends me to open a tab in Safari. And again, we can't have more than one actual instance open, and there's not really any need to teach through the Collaborate app in my experience. Remember that you have the most functionality in utilizing this as a moderator if you're using it on your PC or laptop. If you're using this on the iPad, you can still utilize the device, but you can't share your screen. All right, I encourage you, if you want to practice this before you go live with students and collaborate, to create your own session and make sure that you copy the link, send the link to yourself, open it either on an entirely different device, or if it's on the same device, open it in a new browser window. If you're using Firefox, then probably open Chrome or Safari. I haven't utilized any of these on Internet Explorer. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to do what I can to help. And if I think of new ideas, I'll post them in our Teams location as well. Be safe, everybody. Good luck.